this Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live.
Let's give a warm welcome to our newest member of the Liberal Party, Michael Maw.
A second Conservative MP crosses the floor, bringing the Liberals one shy of a majority. As the House rises for the holiday break, Opposition Leader Pierre Poilievre is here ahead of his party's leadership review in January.
Yeah, it could be exited. Could it be revised? Yes. Could it be renegotiated? Yes. All of those things are on the table.
Trade uncertainty. The U.S. hints at the possible breaking up of CUSMA. The minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, Dominic LeBlanc, is here on the negotiations that are still on ice in Washington. More on Liberal MP Michael Maw's surprise defection, what it means for the government moving forward. Our Sunday Scrum is back to talk Canadian politics in the new year. It all starts now on Rosemary Barton Live. Thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday. The Liberals have gained another MP from the Conservatives, putting the governing party just one seat shy of a majority.
So let's give a warm welcome to our newest member of the Liberal Party, Michael Maw.
Greater Toronto Area MP Michael Maw raised the Liberals' seat count when he crossed the floor from the Conservatives on Thursday night. It was an unexpected move, as Maw was seen at the Conservative Christmas party just the night before and voted with his former party just hours before that announcement was made. It's the second Conservative MP to cross the floor and third to leave the Conservative Party since November. Joining me in studio now to talk about all of that and more, the leader of the official opposition and Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre. Nice to see you, Mr. Poilievre.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for making the time. I want to start with what happened in Australia overnight. At least 11 people killed at a Hanukkah event on Bondi Beach. And just for your thoughts on that, sir.
Well, our condolences for the families. This is another act of anti-Semitic evil and terrorism that have become all too common. This is what happens when we allow hate, terrorism, anti-Semitism to be normalized. We in Canada have to reflect on the fact that there have been rampaging anti-Semitic riots on our streets, fire bombings of children's schools and of Jewish synagogues. It is absolutely unacceptable. We must destroy this terrorism, stand up against anti-Semitism, and make Canada and hopefully the world a safe place for people to wear their mezuzahs, to put their mezuzahs on their doors, to wear their Stars of David and their kippahs, and to be proud Jews. So I'm thinking of all of my Jewish friends and neighbors this Hanukkah.
Okay, move on to some politics now. And I want to talk politics and a bit of policy as well.
Right.
But let's start with what happened last week. You've now lost 2 MPs to the Liberal Party. Both have pointed to your leadership as issues. Michael Maw saying that he was more interested in unity than division. Is this a problem of your leadership at this point?
No, it's a problem of Mark Carney's leadership that after Canadians clearly rejected a costly Liberal majority because they knew it would mean higher grocery prices and higher food costs, he is trying to manipulate his way through backroom deals to get that majority.
He's allowed to do this, though, right? Floor crossing is allowed. You've benefited from it in the past.
But he's trying to take a majority, a costly majority, that would drive up the cost of living and enrich Liberal elites, of course, but not through democratic means. My message to Mark Carney is that if you want a costly majority government to drive up taxes and deficits, then you have to go to the Canadian people and have them vote for it, not do it by dirty backroom deals.
I mean, I know you don't like it, and we can talk about the merits of floor crossing and whether it should be allowed, but it is allowed. This is something that is allowed to happen. So back to my question, is this a sign of a weakness in your leadership that 2 members of your caucus have left?
No, it's a sign of backroom dealings that will drive up the cost of living. And don't take my word for it, take Mr. Maw's word. This is what he said just a few weeks ago. We are in a shameful situation in this country where over 2 million Canadians are visiting food banks every month. At the end of every month, paychecks are not going far enough. Why is that? I'm quoting, The Liberals want to deflect and blame this solely on the trade deficit. However, there's a simple economic fact. When we create more units of currency and map them into the economy, that is not meaningfully producing more goods and services, we get inflation. As a case in point, in the last 5 years, I'll just finish up his quote. In the last 5 years, grocery prices have risen more than 20%. He blames that on Mark Carney's deficit, and that was only a few weeks ago. So
it's possible he didn't write that, though, as we know. Many of your MPs, many of your MPs are given talking.
They were his words. They were his words.
Okay, so
and you know what he was right in when he said that, and it was, but he
What are you doing now? What are you doing now to make sure other caucus members don't leave? What are you saying to them?
Affordability, affordability, affordability. Canadians cannot afford grocery prices because of Carney's hidden Liberal taxes on food. What unites all Conservatives is the belief that you should be able to have a full bank account, a full fridge, and a full stomach all at the same time, something that's not possible after 10 years of Liberals.
We were talking to Minister Champagne about that, and a gentleman who's using a food bank, because you're right, they are at record highs. But obviously there are some people who believe that Mark Carney has the solutions to those problems.
Well, he is the one who's causing the problems. He's bringing in an industrial carbon tax on farm equipment and on fertilizer that drives up food prices, a food packaging tax that adds about $1 billion to grocery bills across the country, a new fuel tax that will be 7 cents a liter next year on farmers, on truckers who bring us our food. And then, of course, there's a $78 billion deficit, twice the size of Trudeau's, which is causing inflation, as Mr. Ma rightly pointed out. And I'm the only one who's going to reverse that inflationary policy. I've been saying this now for 5 years, and I regrettably continually proven right that when you spend more and tax more, then Canadians have to pay more for groceries after 10 Liberal years.
Let's talk a bit about policy, because that's obviously where you want to go to.
Why not?
The Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta. The overall goal of that deal is to get a pipeline, at least one pipeline to the British Columbia coast to get more oil to Asian markets. Do you think that the fundamentals behind that deal are a good idea, that itself is a good idea?
A pipeline to the Pacific?
Well, that part of the deal that the Prime Minister has put on the table with the Alberta Premier makes sense.
Yes, obviously. That's why I put forward a motion in favor of that pipeline. But Mark Carney doesn't think it's a good idea. He voted against his own promised pipeline.
Well, he did that because it didn't have the industrial carbon price in it, as you know.
You make a very good point.
Yes.
Mark
If you
Carney,
had put the whole MOU on the table to vote against, it probably would have worked out better for you in that instance.
But then I would be voting for a costly carbon tax, as you point out, a tax on food, because when you tax the farm equipment and fertilizer, you tax the food. A tax on homes, because when you tax cement, glass, concrete, wood, and other things.
But the Premier of Alberta is comfortable with industrial carbon pricing.
If I could, you asked me why I didn't put it in, because I am against carbon taxes, period. Now, let's talk about the amazing and brilliant Premier of Alberta, who said just the other day when she was endorsing my leadership that I would not have forced a carbon tax on her. And if I were Prime Minister right now, we'd be well on the way to planning a pipeline, something that is not happening under the current Liberal government. Now, let's be clear about Mark Carney. He is a counterfeit. He's pretending to adopt my policies because he knows they're popular, but he's quietly working against them. He's told his Liberal caucus...
You don't believe that he actually wants a pipeline? Because the Alberta Premier believes it.
I do believe what he voted against, which was the pipeline. And Mark, let's take a look at the history here. What you have to believe to trust Mark Carney on this. His party killed this pipeline in a November of 2016 cabinet decision. Mark Carney endorsed that decision to kill the pipeline. I don't believe that Mark Carney has changed from the things that he wrote for 10 years and that his party did for 10 years, which is to block pipelines and try to keep oil and gas in the ground.
Then why does Danielle Smith believe him?
Danielle Smith was very clever because she forced Carney to flip-flop and break his word to his Leave It in the Ground caucus by withdrawing his threatened emissions cap and clean electricity regulations, because those things would have driven up the cost of energy and killed even more jobs. Now, Ms. Smith defended her province by forcing Carney to flip-flop on that. But that, at the end of the day, does not mean that we should give him credit. He was threatening to do a lot of damage. Now he's doing a little less damage. Why doesn't he just get out of the way? We know what it takes to get a pipeline done. The federal government has the sole legal authority to approve it. So approve it. Set the corridor, and the private sector will build it because it's wildly profitable.
You referenced Northern Gateway, and you know that the problems there. Yes, it was a cabinet decision, but the problem is British Columbia and First Nations. So what would you do to try and get their support for a pipeline, or would you just say, "Too bad, we're doing it"?
We're doing it.
Oh. So you wouldn't bother with consultation?
Of course I would consult. That's what my motion said. We do consultations, but we are going to build a pipeline when I'm Prime Minister. As for British Columbia, the Premier does not have a veto. Under our Constitution, Section 92, it is the exclusive domain of the federal government, and under Bill C-5, which Mark Carney asked for, it is the exclusive decision of the Prime Minister. So there's only one person who will decide on this in the end, and that is the Prime Minister of Canada. Mark Carney is quietly whispering to the Leave It in the Ground Liberal caucus, there will never be a pipeline, don't worry.
He must not be saying that because Stephen Guilbeault quit.
Stephen Guilbeault quit because of the emissions cap, but he is saying it, and his own MPs in British Columbia are saying it. And then he voted against a pipeline in the House of Commons. What he's doing, let's be clear, pipelines are popular and profitable. So he's pretending that he's open to one until after the next election so that he can try to win pro-pipeline voters. But then his plan is to kill the project. If you want a pipeline to the Pacific, to add $30 billion of overseas exports, the biggest export project overseas in Canadian history, you will need a conservative government that will get out of the way and let it happen.
Okay, I want to ask you about trade, because that's the other piece that is coming in the new year. There's still no deal. Talks are still stalled, although the Prime Minister speaks to the President. Do you think that the CUSMA review is now the best way forward for Canada in getting any kind of deal with the United States?
My position is that we need tariff-free access to the biggest and most lucrative market in the world, which we had before the Liberal government was elected in 2015. Of course, after the Liberals got in, President Obama started hammering us with new tariffs on softwood lumber that Harper had got lifted. They brought in new Buy America rules, and then it's been one defeat after another. Now,
so
Mark
what would
Carney
you do? What do you think we should be doing here?
We should reflect on the fact that Mark Carney was elected on one promise, that he would negotiate a win with President Trump by July 21st. And here we are. About a half a year later, his promise is broken. American tariffs have doubled. They've tripled on softwood lumber.
But some of that is because of the president. So I'm genuinely curious. What would you do in dealing with Donald Trump?
I will answer that question, but let's be clear. Mark Carney said he could handle Donald Trump.
Well, so did you.
So, and I would have if I were Prime Minister right now.
So what should he be doing?
Well, we have to negotiate from a position of strength. And I have to go back. We need to approve pipelines and natural gas projects and other major resource projects that allow us to ship our single biggest export overseas so that we are not monolithically dependent on the Americans. We need to get rid of the capital gains tax on reinvestments in Canada to bring back the $500 billion of investment Liberals have driven into the U.S. economy. And then you can sit down with the President and say, look, now we're selling our resources to the Asians, to the Europeans. Now we're bringing back our investment and becoming more sovereign, strong, and self-reliant. Now we're in a position of strength. Now let's negotiate. And that would be a far better approach than what Mr. Carney is doing, which is blocking these projects, keeping all of the Liberal taxes and anti-resource project laws in place of the last 10 years, and giving even more of our investment to the Americans.
It's been a long year. I think we can both agree on that, a long, busy political year. Did you take any lessons from this past year, either in the election defeat, in your defeat in your own riding? Is there anything you're reflecting on in terms of what you should be doing differently, better, your leadership style, how you speak to Canadians?
I reflect a lot on why I'm doing this. Why am I in this? And it's the elderly woman who said to me that going shopping used to be her favorite thing to do every week. Now she walks down a grocery aisle and she feels anxious and angry because of how much it costs to fill her fridge, that she gets home and she's stressed out because she cannot afford to eat. I think of the young guy I met who wants to start a family. He's in his 30s. He's been working his whole adult life, and he can't afford a down payment. I am in it for these people, and I need to give them hope. That's what this country needs now more than ever. Hope that you will again be able to afford a home, hope that you can afford food, hope that you'll be safe on your streets. And that will be the obsession of my leadership, to provide hope for a better future.
And that's the why, and super important, obviously, but it's the how I'm asking about, whether you think that you are doing the how the right way.
Well, on the how, so let's break it down. On food, the how is we got to get rid of the industrial carbon tax on food.
I don't mean the policies. I mean you as a leader, whether you feel you're doing that part the right way to connect with those people and talk about what you think are the right solutions.
Yeah, the right solutions, it's not just the industrial carbon tax, though we have to, the underlying problem with inflation is that they're printing money. And whenever you print money, then you bid up the goods that Canadians buy, and it enriches a small group of liberal elite corporate insiders because all their assets go up. But then the working class people who actually carry this country on their shoulders, they get ripped off. And so we need to stop the money printing, get our budget back into balance, cut the bureaucracy, consultants, corporate welfare, foreign aid, handouts to phony refugees, cut that all off, because then you can bring down the deficits, the inflation, and the taxes, and then that young person I met will be able to afford a down payment, and that wonderful grandmother will be able to once again enjoy her visit to the grocery store because she can afford groceries.
Are you looking forward to Christmas with your holiday,
Very
your family?
much so.
Yeah.
We procrastinated on letters to Santa, and so we got them written last night.
Okay.
And
hopefully he'll get them in time.
Well, I know we put them on the Christmas tree, and there was an elf that came and took the letter, and we understand that through that express service, it's going to make it to the North Pole just in time.
Nice of you to come back. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Appreciate
Many blessings. Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you very much. That's Pierre Poilievre, leader of the official opposition and Conservative leader, of course. As we just mentioned off the top of that interview with Mr. Poilievre, in Sydney, Australia, a mass shooting did take place at one of the country's most popular destinations, Bondi Beach. At least 11 people killed there in an attack their Prime Minister is calling an act of evil anti-Semitism. A Canadian eyewitness told CBC News what he experienced during the shooting.
I was just there with a mate, just hanging out, and then we just heard some loud noises. Originally thought they were fireworks, and I told him, like, no, those aren't fireworks, those are gunshots. And then everyone just starts sprinting off the beach.
More than 24 people were also injured, including 2 police officers. The shooting happened at a Jewish event on the first night of Hanukkah, where more than 1,000 people were reportedly gathered. Police say a gunman was killed. A second suspect is in custody. In a post on Twitter X, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said he was horrified by the shooting and said that Canada stands with the people of Australia and Jewish people everywhere. All right, when we come back, we'll talk to the Minister of Internal Trade and Canada-U.S. trade. That formal review of CUSMA is set to take place next year, while Canada looks to replace its outgoing ambassador to the U.S.
I put Canada first, and that's, in fact, why I think right now is the right moment to move along.
Dominic LeBlanc is up next live. You're watching RBL. Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, sorry, I thought there was a clip off the top, is stepping down from her role. Hillman says now is the right time to put together a team to see the CUSMA renegotiations through. That review set to begin in 2026 and could be Canada's best bet at restarting trade talks with the U.S. It comes as the Trump administration says all options are on the table, including walking away from the deal altogether. The minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, Dominic LeBlanc, joins me now live from Moncton. Nice to see you, Minister.
Rosemary, imagine today, Rosemary, is my birthday. I can't think of a better birthday gift than to be on your show.
I can think of one that you might have been happy with as well, and that's Michael Ma deciding that he was going to cross the floor and join your party. As you heard,
that was a nice moment. Yep.
Yeah, as you heard there, though, from Mr. Poilievre, he is questioning the way in which the Liberals might get to a majority. Are you comfortable with possibly getting a majority through floor crossing as opposed to an electoral process?
But first of all, Rosemary, we're not yet there at a majority. I don't know if other Conservative or other MPs will decide to join our caucus. I listened to Mr. Poilievre's interview with you. He forgot how quickly they celebrated a couple of Liberal MPs that crossed to join the Conservative caucus in Mr. Harper's year. So memories are short here. Sanctimony is very high. And hypocrisy is never far away. So this, as you pointed out, is part of a parliamentary tradition. These people were elected by their constituents. They make decisions to leave Mr. Poilievre's caucus for whatever reason they decide. I'm comfortable that these MPs, in the case of my friend from Nova Scotia, Mr. D'Entremont, who made the decision some weeks ago, and Mr. Ma, it's an absolutely legitimate parliamentary decision, and we'll see if others also decide. Mr. Poilievre, of course, accepted no responsibility for those decisions from his caucus members, and that's also not unusual on his part.
Okay, let's move on to some of the things that you have been working on and will have to work on in the new year. The Prime Minister met with the President and the Mexican President in D.C. at that FIFA event. They met behind closed doors for 45 minutes. The Prime Minister's office said they came out committed to working on CUSMA. What does that mean at this stage, Minister? Because it's very hard to get a handle on where things are at.
So, Rosemary, it's a question we ask ourselves often in the government. The Prime Minister said that was the conversation he had with President Sheinbaum of Mexico and Mr. Trump was very positive in the sense that the three of them agreed that the review that was built into the CUSMA agreement 6 years ago will start early in the new year. It's consistent with conversations I've had with Secretary Lutnick in the United States, Ambassador Greer, and I was a couple of weeks ago in Mexico and had a very encouraging conversation with the economy minister in Mexico, who talked about how they're very much in the same position as Canada, worried about these sectoral tariffs that are doing considerable damage to different sectors of the economy, but focused very much on the opportunity to recommit to a trilateral free trade agreement. It's not a renegotiation, it's a review. No. We hope the Americans maintain that posture. And Rosemary, again, I saw in your introduction, there have been public comments from different American officials about different options. In private, the conversations are much more reassuring, or sort of traditional review under American law as these treaties would evolve. So we remain hopeful.
What was happening before the infamous Ontario ads that stopped the formal talks, the formal negotiations, seemed to be that you were making some progress on these sectoral tariffs. Is that now off the table, and the government's approach is to work through the CUSMA review?
I would, and you're right, we believe we were making progress. We hadn't arrived at a deal, but we were in a level of detail and exchange and frequency of meetings with senior American counterparts on steel, aluminum, and energy. We'd agreed that the next move would be on automobiles and softwood lumber, critical minerals. So the Prime Minister and the President had agreed on a process. We were hopeful. You're right. Mr. Trump decided to suspend those negotiations. That's regrettable. It would have been important for the Canadian economy had we been able to land a deal that was in the interests of Canadian workers and Canadian businesses. I wouldn't say, Rosemary, it's off the table in the sense that the minute the Americans decide that it's in their economic interest to continue. And obviously they did, because they were spending hours with us and advancing. So we're ready to resume those conversations and believe that we can get these bilateral arrangements that will bring relief to these sectors. However, like the Mexicans, the next time that there'll be direct engagement on the trade issue is likely to be as the beginning of the CUSMA trilateral review in January. So that's important too, to recommit to that agreement. But if ever in those conversations there's an opportunity for the Americans to agree to something that would be in their interest and in Canada's economic interest, of course we're all in and ready to do that work.
Is Mark Wiseman the next ambassador to the United States, Minister?
I saw again at the beginning, your reference to Ambassador Hillman, somebody that I have adored working with, learned a lot from, really like her. She's become a friend of mine, super impressive woman who served the country so well. The Prime Minister will, in due course, make a decision and an announcement on the successor.
That's not a no, though. That's not a no.
I get you have to ask the question, but Rosemary, I've been around long enough that you didn't expect me to answer it. So
I did not, but you didn't deny it either. So I feel like that's probably a win.
But denying it would be part of an answer too, right?
Sure. Alberta and Ottawa have now agreed to this deal that could lead to a new pipeline to the West Coast. British Columbia, as you know, very concerned. Many First Nations communities also very concerned. Is the federal government going to do any of the work to convince those groups, the province or communities, that this should happen? Or is that the sole responsibility of Alberta here? Because as you heard from Mr. Poilievre, he questions whether the government actually wants a pipeline at all.
Sure, and I would understand why the opposition leader sort of in the corner he's in would say that. But we have been very clear, both with Premier Smith and her government, and with Premier Eby, members of his cabinet, British Columbia First Nations, that we're prepared, Canada is prepared to do the work with Alberta and British Columbia and those rights holders to see if there's a way to do this pipeline. So, and in the agreement itself, it talks about sort of a trilateral process involving Canada, Alberta, and British Columbia. Mr. Poilievre pretends you can just impose it on people. We know the legal history and the political and social history of that kind of reckless action. That's not our approach. But we do think that there is a way that pipeline makes sense economically, environmentally, and socially. But it's a lot of work. We all have a lot of work ahead of us. Right. The Alberta government in the MOU, again, one of the challenges with the Conservatives is they sort of slice a piece of it and assert a falsehood with great indignation. Alberta made a number of important commitments, as you noted in the interview previously, around industrial carbon price and so on.
They did, but the government also walked away from a number of environmental policies, climate policies that were important both to the Prime Minister and to the Liberal Party previously. And Stephen Guilbeault, you know, your former cabinet colleague, was very upset by that and questions the commitment to climate change. But he also questions whether this is going to fuel the separatist movement in Quebec. So I would like to hear from you as the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs about whether you think that is a factor, whether making Alberta happy is coming at a cost to support in Quebec.
So Stephen Guilbeault's a friend of mine. I like him a lot. I have a lot of respect for him. I wouldn't have necessarily drawn the straight line that he did there. The responsibility of the Prime Minister and the Government of Canada is for the unity of the whole country. The Prime Minister, I think, has said, and I agree with this, so has my colleague, the Environment Minister, Madame de Bruzen, if we want to achieve our climate change commitments, the provinces have to participate. So if Alberta was refusing to participate in a whole series of measures, contesting before the courts a whole series of measures, that the Government of Canada was trying to implement, perhaps there's a way to have them as a partner with other governments in a responsible way. So I don't think it's a zero-sum game. It's not a choice where you either please Alberta and therefore somehow put at risk the unity of the country in Quebec. I think the whole country, Rosemary, needs a Canadian economy that's growing, sustainable, responsible. The whole country benefits from the economy of Alberta. I come from Atlantic Canada. Every week I see people traveling back and forth on the airplanes to work in the energy sector in Western Canada. So I don't think we can be agnostic as a country to the responsible economic success of the energy sector in Western Canada.
Minister Dominic LeBlanc, I will wish you a happy birthday and happy holidays, sir. Thank you for making the time this morning.
And thank you, Rosemary. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. As we've been talking about, the Liberal Party now just one seat away from a majority as another Conservative MP steps across the aisle to join the Prime Minister's caucus.
Some, like literally, just joined our party.
So how is that going to impact Pierre Poilievre's leadership review coming up in January? Could there be more defections before the next sitting? Sunday Scrum is back with all of that just ahead. You're watching RBL.
It's a problem of Mark Carney's leadership that after Canadians clearly rejected a costly Liberal majority because they knew it would mean higher grocery prices and higher food costs, he is trying to manipulate his way through backroom deals to get that majority. Canadians cannot afford grocery prices because of Carney's hidden Liberal taxes on food. What unites all Conservatives is the belief that you should be able to have a full bank account, a full fridge, and a full stomach all at the same time.
Leader of the official opposition there, Pierre Poilievre, from my interview just a few moments ago, responding to the second Conservative MP swapping their blue jersey for a red one. How will it impact the upcoming Conservative Party leadership review? What does it mean for the federal parties in the new year? Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Émilie Nicolas, columnist for Le Devoir in Montreal this morning. Ian Bailey, a reporter for the Globe and Mail. He's here in Ottawa. And Robert Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. He's in Toronto. Good to see you all. I'll start with you, Émilie, because you didn't get as much time as you should have due to technical problems in the last one. What do you make of that claim from the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, around floor crossing, that the Prime Minister is trying to get a majority through backroom deals, attracting MPs from his party to the Liberal caucus?
Yes, I think Mark Carney is trying to do that. And I think if Pierre Poilievre was in his exact same position, he would try to do the same, because that's not about ideological line. That's about trying to build a majority with yourself, which is a behavior, politically speaking, that the Westminster Parliament system absolutely rewards. Yeah. And so that it is in terms of that. When it comes, though, to why it is that Conservative MPs are crossing, I think it comes to the fact that despite what Pierre Poilievre is saying, Mark Carney has definitely been shifting to the right in terms of economic policy when it comes to a comparison to Justin Trudeau, and it shows. And it is attractive to a part of the Conservative caucus, and it is done at the irritation of some of the bench within the Liberals in terms of their own conviction, especially if they were recruited by the Justin Trudeau era. It's showing, of course, more perhaps with the most sparkles with the leaving of Stephen Guilbeault and the op-ed that he wrote in La Presse and the Globe and Mail with while still being a Liberal MP, which I think is something he's getting away with because of the short minority/majority of the Liberal government. But it is also expressing something that within the environmental caucus of the Liberal Party, which was created this summer, Stephen Guilbeault is saying out loud things that other people are thinking as well. And so that might be, I think, for me, the challenge that Mark Carney will have for the year is trying to basically build in by swallowing part of the Conservative Party while not actually losing part of its base that actually got him elected. Most of it is based on former NDP voters, Quebec, and a lot of women as well who voted for Mark Carney.
And I put some of that to Dominic LeBlanc there in the interview just now, who thinks that, I guess, that you obviously need to lead for the whole country, and that is fair, but it does come, some of these choices, Rob, I'll go to you next, with the risk of alienating other parts of your party. Pierre Poilievre is facing a very real threat right now, but I wonder whether there's not something bubbling inside the Liberal caucus as well that Mr. Carney is going to have to manage at some point.
Yeah, and I think, Rosie, that was the thinking behind that motion that the Tories put forward to try to embarrass the Liberals and expose divisions. But as Emily says, Guilbeault voted with his feet and left cabinet, but he didn't leave caucus. And he presumably will still vote with the government since he's still a Liberal MP. I thought the thing that surprised me about your interview with Mr. Poilievre, and good for him for showing up, because that's something that Pierre Poilievre a year ago didn't think that he had to go to CBC or CTV or the Toronto Star or the Globe and Mail and talk. But I think I'm not sure there was the self-reflection that I would have thought you might see. I mean, losing 2 caucus members and having another one, Matt Genereux from Edmonton, saying that he's going to quit, and then, of course, Genereux didn't vote in that budget vote. There's a problem there. And I think I was speaking to some Tories last week about this, Rosie, and one of the nightmare scenarios for them is Mr. Poilievre passes his leadership review in Calgary in January with flying colors, 85% or whatever, and then after that there are a couple of more defections to the Liberals, and then you have a majority, and then you have the Tories saddled with a leader who they've just supported, and yet he's in opposition for another 3 years. And that's something that they are worried about.
Listen, I will also give Mr. Poilievre credit for doing the interview, because I thought after that happened that he might not show up. And I guess the action of showing up and taking questions on, tough questions about your leadership, Ian, it is a change in Mr. Poilievre's behavior. But Rob's right. He didn't really say anything about what else he's going to do to make sure that he doesn't lose other MPs.
Well, it sounds like Mr. Poilievre does. I mean, how many times have we expected Mr. Poilievre to pivot, to change, or for the new Poilievre to show up? That hasn't happened. He's comfortable with this style, and I think he's taking this down the road. I mean, I agree with Emily and Rob and everything they've said on this. I mean, Mr. Poilievre is like a hockey coach now, looking on the ice while, and the game is almost over, it's tied, and members of his team are on the ice deciding to play for the other side. If more Conservatives cross the floor in the coming days, then I don't think a 150% endorsement in that leadership vote is going to help Mr. Poilievre. This is going to be a very challenging situation for him going forward. And we haven't mentioned Aaron Gunn, the BC MP, who is now has the choice of sticking around in federal politics or going back to provincial politics. And from my understanding, it's probably a 50-50, maybe 60-40, which way he's going to go.
Yeah, he could still be he could still run for the BC Conservative Party and keep his seat. I mean, that has been done before, so that's possible.
Certainly, but he might decide just to cut his ties and go all in to BC Conservative politics, maybe get into BC Conservative government. One thing I have to say, I mean, given the political year we've had with Mark Carney now near a majority after the way things were in past, I suppose there is hope for Mr. Poilievre. You just never know how things are going to play out. Things could turn his way. And I guess, to be fair, that is entirely possible.
What do you think, Emily? Is that likely? That's probably not a fair question to ask you, but it is, Ian's right. This time last year, Mark Carney was not a politician.
I think it's the interview you did with Pierre Poilievre was very, very much focused on policy. It seems to be what he wanted to speak to you with. When it comes to his leadership style, he skated around the questions, but part of it is also that some of that needs to be perhaps resolved, even if he wanted to, in his best mood to try to cement his caucus. It's not necessarily something that you would do through journalists. He would need to spend the holiday season making some calls, making sure everybody's happy and playing nice. From what we've heard from Don Tremont's story is that there is either the carrot and the stick. So what was described as an attempt to basically bully him into staying into the Conservative caucus backfired and pushed him out. And so there might be also other MPs as well who are tired of the heavy discipline and the absence of maybe being listened to or being treated as something else than just soldiers. And so that might be something that Pierre Poilievre wants to look into, but I don't think that's something he's going to be speaking to on the CBC or any other large network for what it matters. Maybe on a podcast.
Well, we'll take what we can get in this holiday season. Emily Nicolai, Ian Bailey, Robert Benzie, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next year. Okay, bye guys.
All the best. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Still ahead, the impact of tariffs continue to hammer certain sectors. Layoffs continue to mount for those hard-hit industries like softwood, for instance, while the future of that deal remains up in the air. The mayor of 100 Mile House, recently hit with the closure of a lumber mill, joins me next. You're watching RBL. We are still tracking that breaking news today out of Australia. At least 11 people are dead and dozens more injured after 2 gunmen opened fire at a Jewish holiday event at Bondi Beach in Sydney.
An attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on every Australian. And every Australian tonight will be, like me, devastated on this attack on our way of life. There is no place for this hate, violence and terrorism in our nation.
That's Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese there speaking earlier today, calling the scene shocking and distressing. Police say one of the suspected gunmen is dead, the second taken into custody and in critical condition. The attack happened while hundreds had gathered at that world-famous beach for a celebration on this first day of Hanukkah. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney posted to social media this morning saying, quote, "Canada stands with the people of Australia and Jewish people everywhere." He also called for support for the Jewish community to ensure that everyone can thrive in our society. We also asked Mr. Poilievre about that just a few moments ago. He also denouncing those actions in Australia. A story we'll continue to track through the day. More Rosemary Barton live in just a couple. While Canadian businesses are trying to adapt to tariffs still put in place and trade talks still called off, it has been a difficult time for some particular industries and sector, particularly West Fraser Timber, announcing a closing of the entire mill in 100 Mile House, British Columbia, by the end of the year. More than 100 people directly losing their jobs in the community. Maureen Pinckney is the mayor of 100 Mile House, and she joins me now. Nice to see you, Mayor. Thank you for being here.
Yes, good morning.
What is the impact of that mill closure on your community, Mayor?
So the direct impact is 156 jobs, which is really about 500 jobs when you include all the support workers, and it will affect every business in our community. It's a very small town, so there isn't anyone that's not affected by it.
And of course, you know, never good news at any time of the year. This time of the year, I would imagine, particularly upsetting to people. How are people feeling? What are they saying?
Yeah, it's, you know, I think it's not a shock that the forest industry has had its difficulties and cost recoveries and long hauls and all the issues they're dealing with. But this time of year, it's a definite struggle. And I think for the employees themselves, it was quite a shock to really start to find out by the canceling of their Christmas party. But our community stepped up.
And how are you stepping up? Tell me how you're trying to support people.
So along with all the work that does happen behind the scenes to help the individual workers on either job relocation, helping them maybe retire early, whatever all of that looks like very individually, our community is hosting a Christmas dinner for all of the affected workers, and they have really pulled together. We have so many donations. It's amazing. People that don't even live here saw the first few interviews and have e-transferred us funds to host a dinner for all these workers. So it's pretty phenomenal, and we're very excited that coming up just this next Saturday, we're going to have a really, really good community function that's just going to show how important small communities are, how important every person in the community is.
Well, and that's a testament to your community for sure. What are you doing as the mayor, as a politician, to try and, you know, attract new industry to the area? I don't know if you're speaking directly to the federal government or provincial government about what can be done here in the longer term.
And that's what we have to focus on, is not just long-term, short-term. We rely on the taxation from those mills. Our community is very small, the circle around our town, so we don't have a big tax base. And, you know, we're looking at short-term funding. We need funding from the province and the federal government to step up in the short term. And then we need some long-term solutions on how we can get more industry here. We have affordable land. We have a big industrial area that can outfit so many things. The rail goes through it. So we need the railway to stay. That's another battle we're fighting right now. But yeah, we've been to Victoria to talk to the Premier. We have had our MP Todd Doherty hand deliver letters in Ottawa for us. Yeah. So we are being very proactive to get help.
Is there any anger, Mayor, directed towards the U.S. president or the United States for this? I mean, I know softwood's always sort of a challenge, but this has been particularly hard-hitting.
Yeah, you know, I don't think you can really put it down to one particular thing or one person. This just ended up being the ultimate thing that really broke it. This has been going on for a long time. For many, many years, we've seen the forestry industry, you know, not being handled like we would like to see to be sustainable. So this is just one more thing.
Maureen Pinckney, the mayor of 100 Mile House, British Columbia. Sorry we're speaking under these circumstances, but glad you and your community are stepping up for people. Thank you so much. Happy holidays to you, Mayor.
Thank you very much for reaching out.
All right, and that is RBL for this week. Time flies when you have live guests and news happening, breaking all over the place. We've got one more show before the end of the season and our holiday break, so enjoy this week, and we'll see you back here next Sunday, if not before. Take good care.